I suppose we have to remember what kind of world were we living in 1986. It was at the height of the Cold War. East and West saber rattling, threatening each other with, with mutual annihilation. The world was awash with nuclear weapons. I mean, they had enough nuclear weapons to kill every human being on the planet about 16 times at one mad stage. So I was very involved in the peace movement, the campaign for nuclear disarmament, and trying to create a world of peace and move towards nuclear disarmament. I was speaking in a school in Middleton, County Cork. I was on the stage, full assembly of students, and the next minute the principal teacher walked out on the stage to my right, and she said, "There's been a news flash on RTE. There's been a terrible nuclear explosion in the Soviet Union." And it turns out this was Chernobyl, and that was a defining moment for me. And after that, because I knew the theory of what could happen from the dropping of the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945, I knew potentially the destruction of human life and of the soil and everything. I knew that radiation is transboundary by nature. It doesn't need an entry or an exit visa. It will travel literally wherever the winds and the rain will carry it. So getting information to people was really important. I got in touch with a group of local doctors here in Cork, and we put together an information for pregnant women, for mothers of small children, families, school teachers, principal teachers, ordinary people. And we set up a hotline, telephone hotline. In early May of 1986, it came to Ireland. Ireland had very heavy rain in 1986, and we got a huge dusting of radioactivity. So really, in a way, that was the beginning of the journey. It was just in the advent of fax machines. I'll always remember it because we didn't know anyone that had a fax machine, and all of a sudden our fax machine went off. It was a 2-line message from a group of Ukrainian, Russian and Belarusian doctors, and it said 2 lines: SOS appeal, for God's sake, help us to get the children out. Children were constantly being recontaminated through the air, the water, the food. Like, this is like an invisible war here. Like, except in this war, the enemy is invisible by its very nature. You can't see it, taste it, touch it, and yet it is everywhere. Oh my goodness. I mean, you talk about pivotal moments in your life, and certainly that first visit when it was still like the Soviet Union, and being brought to places that you didn't know even existed, like mental asylums for children, seeing children lying in their own excrement, in straitjackets, emaciated bodies, being overwhelmed by the smells. Like, if I could only bottle the smells from my nostrils, being assaulted by a smell that I can only describe being like a mixture of boiled cabbage but boiled in urine, and seeing children in straitjackets, seeing children tied to radiators, children banging their heads off the walls because of lack of stimulation, children that didn't know their own names, children that didn't know whether they were boys or girls or what their ages were. Because these, I learned, I didn't know any of this, I learned were actually warehouses for children, to keep them there until they went to the next stage, which was across the road to the graveyard, or to, if they lived, to another mental asylum. But I can still remember the silence of these beautiful villages, like, which had a history that spanned back, hundreds of years. They were like cottage, almost in a time warp. They were so beautiful. Most of these villages didn't have electricity or water. They didn't have any of the so-called benefits of nuclear power. They lived actually a very peasant farming lifestyle, and yet their land was ruined, their lives were ruined. And walking into their homes, seeing what it was like to see a table set for a dinner that was never eaten, clothes behind the door, a bed where you could see the imprint of a body that was never slept in again. And it reminded me of what happened on the Marie Celeste, you know, and like you felt very much like a voyeur. So what do you do with all of the exposure to the senses of all of this? It was very challenging. Those first years were incredibly challenging of what can we do. There hasn't been a town, a village, a street in Ireland that over 40 years hasn't been touched by this. We have brought in 26,500 children from Chernobyl to loving homes the length and breadth of Ireland, because we knew from the scientific evidence that for every month that we gave these children respite from eating, sleeping and breathing in the zone where they were, that it would give them the gift of 2 years onto their lives. And people inundated us with offers of help and support for the anniversary. We are currently, as I'm talking to you, we are getting the medical material, the equipment, and doing the logistics for an international team of cardiac pediatric surgeons to fly them in to the humanitarian front line of Ukraine to perform life-saving surgeries on a condition, thanks be to God, that we've never had it here, and they say they wish that we never have it here. It's called Chernobyl heart. This is a condition that a newborn baby cannot live with. They will die without surgical intervention. Our surgeons will yet again, as they have done for the last 4 years of the war, run the gauntlet. They will put their own lives at risk. It is breath by breath. It is heartbeat by heartbeat. It is one small heart at a time. These little babies put their physical tiny hearts and their hopes in the hearts of our surgeons, and one by one we try and make a miracle happen. The genetic damage which cannot be undone. We cannot undo the genetics, not only human beings, but of all plant life, flora, fauna, all animal life. And it lay like buried deep in the soil of the lands of these 3 affected countries, known as the exclusion zone. And unfortunately, Chernobyl became center stage for all of the wrong reasons in February 2022 with the invasion from the Belarusian side by the Russians into Ukraine. And that invasion assault through the world's most toxic and radioactive environment came through the Chernobyl zone, which shocked the world. And for the first time in the history of modern warfare, in the history of the atomic age, they have weaponized nuclear facilities, and that does not bode well for future wars, and something we need to take heed of. We neglect Ukraine at our peril, and that actually re-released radioactivity that was delicately balanced in the top centimeters of the soil. You had thousands of troops, all the war paraphernalia flooding through the exclusion zone over the border, and they re-released all this radioactivity. And just one radioactive element, its half-life is 25,000 years. So it has a life of 250 centuries. Like, we're talking about infinity. If I ever get to the pearly gates and I'm asked by himself, you know, why should we let you in here? Just thinking of all the hundreds of children that were adopted after Alexei and Anna, that is one of the finite moments. I suppose also getting the privilege of being able to speak at the General Assembly at the United Nations and to tell the story, not the scientific story, but the human story of the impact of this terrible human tragedy. And then for the UN to listen. And then they adopted the April 26th for the infinity, for as long as the UN exists, we hope that's for infinity, that April 26th would be United Nations Chernobyl Remembrance Day. That will be a day that will survive long after me and all of our wonderful volunteers as a day of remembrance, where we reach out to the people and say, you are not peripheral, you are not forgotten. Like, we are with you, you know, we're shoulder to shoulder. We are leaning in with you to say solidarity. You know, like we have love for all and really hatred for none. And what we want to do is to make our mark, to say things can be different, things can be better. And like, it's just the power of ordinary people coming together to do really extraordinary things. You know, and I often say to myself, you know, what kind of drives me? And I honestly mean this, that it is not about altruism, that it actually, if, you know, we all ask ourselves at different times of our life, you know, like, what is the purpose to my life? Why am I here? What am I doing? Do I have value? You know, and I suppose this has told me that this is why I was born, really, was to just do my bit. There's nothing special or unique about me, 100,000%. Anybody could do what I have done and continue to do. And I think that's really kind of, I suppose, what I would love to be part of the legacy, is that you don't have to come from a special context or to have a special qualification. Really, I've always operated from the heart to the heart.